Great. Thank you, Stephen. And I just wanted to start off with saying, hey, those were some very informative sessions from Rubric and Pythian so far. So as Stephen mentioned, my name is Eric Sheffley. I work over here at Satori. The session I'm really going to give today is going to focus on what I see as probably the biggest potential for data governance teams and security efforts to collaborate together and get to the heart of this big discussion going on around, how do we demonstrate real business value and how do we be effective with the resources and time we put into these projects. Just to quickly give some context on my background and what brings me into the subject is I've spent most of the last decade working in customer-facing roles, starting with data quality projects, moving on to data quality and data governance, and eventually even data quality, data governance, and data enrichment. And I share that because I think it defines what my overall takeaway has been around the progression of data governance, which I think is captured well here, right? Over the last decade or so, we've really seen that a lot of these functions within the business as they relate to data, perhaps that had some mixed or unclear ownership, have slowly become a broader part of this idea of data governance, right? And what that really looks like when you think about the maturity and the progress that most organizations go through in data governance, and a lot of ways this matches up with how solutions have evolved. But what we see typically is organizations starting with what you might describe as kind of this prescriptive approach to data governance. What I mean by that is, using these tools to go out and start saying, okay, this is what data we should have. This is what it should look like. This is how it should be used. And this is who should own it. As that progresses, we start to see more of the descriptive capabilities start to come in and come into focus, right? What does our data actually look like? Where does it exist? Where is it going over time? And what changes can we see in that data as it's being used or as new additions are made to the organization? And then finally, what we see is probably a more mature data governance organization today is how do we start bridging the gap between those two, right? And these are functions that have existed for a long time under kind of the idea of data quality, but have become more standard to data governance, which is, how do we make sure that data looks like how we expect it to look? How do we clean it up so it's fit for use? And how do we kind of create that golden record and kind of single truth in the organization? And really, what a lot of organizations have been building towards is kind of this desired outcome where data is easy to find, it's fit for the different purposes in the business, and it's providing the highest level of value. And of course, when you talk about data governance, a big part of that as well is compliance. And while it's just 8 items on the list here, the reality is typically getting to this stage, what you see is months and more likely years, right? It's not an exaggeration to say I've been on meetings where I've seen organizations pull up a presentation and show me their 3-year plan to get to this point. And I don't want to belittle any of this. This is all very critical work to a good data practice. But the reality is very few of these items here are really what the business cares about, right? They care about what that allows you to do. And in that regard, you start to see, okay, what's actually missing from all the stuff that data governance covers today, right? You can look at the security and compliance concerns on, how do we control access to data? How do we make sure we aren't exposing sensitive data either by masking it or redacting it? And how do we quickly get visibility and auditing into how data is used across the organization? And then also these capabilities around, okay, how do we actually enable and make sure that our investments in data are being used throughout the business, right? And that means making sure that users can find data, that you have a very fast time to insight. You can make like real-time, accurate, trusted decisions. And also just broadly, how do we make sure we're efficiently using our time, right? We're investing in the right things. Teams aren't sitting around waiting for access to the right data. And when you start to look at these components that are missing is when we see what's really going on in data governance in a lot of organizations today is when you can't answer these questions, it starts to cast doubt on what data governance is really doing. Is it creating more work for the business? There's constant discussions around what's the actual business value of these large catalogs. And unfortunately, what we see is that chief data officers end up having kind of one of the shortest average tenures within the organization, from anywhere from 2 or 2.5 years, I think are the latest numbers. But there's also a lot of potential here for the modern organization to say, how can we draw the straightest line to these items that the business cares about and that kind of improves everybody's day-to-day life working with data? And to understand where the gap is and getting to that point, it's important to also look at where is data security going, especially over the last 10, 15 years. There's three kind of defining trends, in my opinion. One is obviously the move away from lockdown on-premise data center where everything is controlled within your firewall to now data is stored in the cloud. It's accessed with a variety of SaaS solutions that you might have a much more limited level of control on. Along with that, we've seen a massive explosion in the definition of who is a data consumer, right? Now you have sales and marketing and sales ops and accounting all working with sensitive or proprietary data in some way and wanting to bring in their own tools that they're comfortable with using. And while that's all going on, we're seeing a increase in the amount of regulation around data, right? It's becoming more granular and requiring a stricter level of controls around how data is stored and used. And because of all these trends, what you see is, in a lot of cases, your traditional security org is starting to kind of back away from data security specifically, right? They don't want to be restrictive to the data and engineering teams about what they can do, but they don't have the capabilities within their team a lot of times to make sure these controls are being implemented and monitored in real time. And what we see from our surveys that we run is that there's really a growing mixed model of who owns data security. Which can be a good thing, but can also grow into, if not one team is managing it, then nobody really feels like it's their responsibility, which is a huge area of risk for the business, but also a big potential for data governance to come in and start helping everybody collaborate and get to those goals that are relevant for the business. And what really needs to happen to get to that ideal world where everything is, compliant and data is being used efficiently and correctly is, you need to look at what each team with a stake in it needs to do their job and what they expect to see, right? When you focus on what a security teams want, they mostly want to not be overly dependent on other teams to make sure that data policies are being followed, being able to quickly run regular audits or compliance checks around data. And they want to be able to write plain English rules around, okay, what should we do when we see different types of PII or otherwise sensitive things? Your engineering teams, they want to be able to make sure that a lot of this work around managing data is automated. It's centralized, so they're not spending time rebuilding solutions onto every single database or application they're bringing in. And they want to make sure that any solution they're bringing in to put security around data has a minimal level of change management, so it's not disruptive to what they've already built and what the business needs to see delivered. And then most importantly is the data consumer requirements, right? What they really care about is just making sure they can quickly get access to the data they need to make impactful decisions. So that's stuff like getting self-service access to data, having that data already be curated and visible to them on a level of relevancy to their role or projects they're working on. And then also finally, the ability to use a variety of different tools so they're not restricted to maybe like one dashboarding tool that the business allows. This is really complicated and takes just as long as a lot of the stuff we've gotten to, but thankfully kind of where the market's going is there are a lot of solutions now like Satori that enable this kind of data security platform mindset. And the important thing when you think about what a data security platform brings is the separation of these controls from the application level or the database level and creating this singular location where you can automate and monitor a lot of that work, right? So Satori, for example, it gives you that ability to set up access workflows, including self-service or approval required. You can run compliance work like classifying data, auditing on data access, and just monitoring activity across a diverse data ecosystem. And then finally is the security component, right? How do we set up to make sure that only the right people with the right validated reason can actually see sensitive data and we're not overexposing the business to risk while still keeping it in a model that's not slowing down access to data or the ability for people to get access to all the relevant data they need for their job. Just wrapping up, there is some very exciting things you can do as you start to implement a data security platform like Satori. Here I have a screenshot directly from our platform that captures our data portal. This is just one way you can start creating curated assets for end users where they can go into a single location, see what data is available, and even request and get access to data right in a single screen. So no more waiting around for engineering teams to go provision users, no more looking around to try to find where the right data is. It's all centralized and curated based on a user's role or attributes within the organization. And just kind of some of the proof points that we see, right, to finish it up is really categorized in three things that we see from our customers. One is a lot faster project acceleration, faster time to deliver new stuff when you know that security and compliance is kind of going to be guaranteed from the get-go through the data security platform. Along with that is the reduction in cost and overhead when you have less people running manual work to run these checks or manage users. And then, of course, eliminate of risk as it comes to overprivileged users. Just to wrap it up, if this is relevant for you, if you're working on kind of maybe optimizing your data governance or data security practice and want to focus more on the business value conversation, I welcome anybody to reach out. But we also do have a version of Satori online for a test drive that you just need to submit your email, or we do have a open source project available for you to check out. So with that, I'll wrap it up and hand it back to Stephen.